story you're about to hear happened just a few years ago. It was shared by a young Colombian who lived with his classmates, an experience that none of them could explain for privacy reasons. He has preferred to remain anonymous, but he has entrusted me with the details of what happened so that I can pass them on. I want to warn you that if you are an impressionable person, this story might leave you with an unsettling feeling before you get fully into the facts. It's important that you understand the context. It all happened during a social service camp that this young man and his group organize every year. It was part of a school program in which students traveled to rural communities to carry out relief and coexistence work. This time the chosen destination was a small town hidden among the mountains of Antioquia, Colombia, surrounded by thick forests and shrouded in a fog that never seemed to dissipate. The village was small, almost forgotten by time. Houses built of old wood and zinc roofs were scattered among the trees. Only a few families lived there. And conditions were rudimentary, with no constant electricity, no drinking water, and almost complete isolation from the outside world. However, what really stood out about this place was an old construction that the locals called the Stance. The room was an abandoned hamlet, located about 20 minutes from the center of the town, completely covered in weeds and practically demolished. According to the older inhabitants, this structure had belonged to a wealthy family that mysteriously disappeared more than a century ago. Since then, the place had developed a sinister reputation. Locals avoided going near it, especially after dark. It was said that something dark dwelt there, something that didn't want to be disturbed. The group arrived in town at noon on a Monday. At first, everything seemed normal. They were warmly received by the inhabitants and quickly got to work, helping to repair roofs, organizing activities for the children, and living with families. The first 2 nights passed without incident, although some began to notice certain disturbing details. One of the young people who slept next to the others in an improvised house as a bedroom. He mentioned having heard strange noises during the early morning. Heavy footsteps that seemed to surround the house, as if someone was walking slowly around it. They thought it was an animal, maybe a dog or a wild cat, and they didn't think much of it. But on the 3rd day, those little details turned into something much more disturbing. That night, while the group ate dinner in the small kitchen of the house, one of them noticed something through the window. It was a dark, motionless figure, watching them from the trees. At first, they thought it was some townsman, but when they tried to get closer to talk to him, the figure just disappeared. The strange thing was that none of them heard footsteps or any noise, as if that presence had never been there. The atmosphere began to change. During the day, everything seemed normal, but as night fell, a feeling of discomfort began to take hold of everyone. Some described feeling something watching them from the darkness, while others said they heard barely audible whispers. But the worst came when one of the leaders of the group, a skeptical young man who did not believe in ghost stories, decided to explore the room. It was 9 p.m. at night when, accompanied by 3 companions, he began the path towards the abandoned construction. They carried flashlights and a camera to document what they would find, according to them. As he neared the room, the air became strangely cold, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of branches beneath his feet as he entered the structure. The first thing they noticed was the walls covered in ancient graffiti and strange marks carved into the wood. There were symbols none of them could identify. But the most disturbing thing was at the back of the building, a small room, completely empty, where the air felt heavy and oppressive. It was there where one of them, the camera manager, began to scream, according to his story. He had clearly seen a humanoid figure in one of the corners of the room, something that seemed to move slightly in the shadows. The rest of the group saw nothing, but the sense of danger was so strong that they decided to leave the place immediately. In their haste to get out, they left the camera and part of the equipment behind. That night the whole group had trouble sleeping. Some reported hearing banging on the walls, while others claimed to feel as if something invisible was walking among them. One of the boys woke up screaming, stating that he had felt a cold hand on his face. The next day they looked for the oldest old man in town, a man almost 90 years old, who told them about what possibly was in the room. According to him, many years ago, a man accused of practicing dark rites had lived there. Although he was never caught, rumors said that he had performed forbidden sacrifices and rituals, and that his spirit, full of hatred and resentment, still inhabited the place. The last night in town was the scariest. As the group prayed in the small chapel of the place, the dim light of the candles began to flicker until it was completely extinguished. The darkness was absolute, and the silence was broken by a guttural sound no one could identify. One of the young men began to tremble and murmur incoherently, as if in a trance. It was necessary to remove him from the place and pray for him for hours, until he finally calmed down. When the day came to leave, everyone agreed that something dark had been stalking them throughout their stay. Some tried to find logical explanations, while others preferred not to talk more about the subject. The only thing they knew for sure was that they never wanted to return to that town again. Today, the young man who shared this story assures that he still has nightmares about what happened. Although he considers himself a skeptic, he admits that there are things in this world that we cannot explain, forces that seem to be beyond our understanding. What did they find in the room? It was just a collective suggestion, or something really dark and malevolent inhabited that place. That, my friend, is up to you.